Morning, everyone. Good morning. So, yes, there's already been a few things in the chat. I'm going to kick off with Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday, where he said a number of things. He's actually been carrying out interviews today. I'm going to go over some of the things he's been saying. But one of the more remarkable things was he said, I'm cancelling these policies. They're all terrible sounding policies that he was cancelling. The only problem is they don't actually exist. So I'll just put them up just to remind us all. So he said, and then produced a graphic afterwards, we're stopping heavy-handed measures, like taxes on eating meat. And people go, oh, I don't want taxes on eating meat. So there are no taxes on eating meat. Also, because this morning, Rishi Sunak's been tackled about this. He's been tackled, I think, by Nick Robinson. And they were saying things like, hang on a minute, it says here, you said you wanted to be honest, but then you said you were scrapping things that were not government policy. Where was the plan for a tax on meat? To which Sunak apparently said, the Climate Change Committee talked about the need for an accelerated shift away from eating meat. And Robinson said, well, that's not a tax on meat. And then he said, and then the next one, new taxes to discourage flying. Again, there's no proposals for any of these things either. It's not even like... So first of all, these policies don't exist, right? Apart from the very last one, which I'll come to. They don't exist. Taxes on eating meat doesn't exist. New taxes to discourage flying doesn't exist. You could argue some of these things should exist, by the way, but they don't exist. Sorting your rubbish into 7 different bins. So that's obviously aimed at getting the people who chunter about having to put things in the... the recycling bin and the garden bin, and like maybe you've got a tin cans bin, bottled glass bin and stuff like that, and they go, oh, I've already got 4, I don't want 7. It's like, there's no plans for 7, you idiots. Compulsory car sharing. I don't want to share my car. There's no plans for it. And it's not just that these aren't policies. It's not just that they don't exist as policies. No one's even proposing them. Nobody. There aren't even proposals. It's not like Labour are saying they would do these things either. It's an absolute nonsense. I am just going to come up. I saw a sneaky comment at the top near the start. Who was it? It was a really good one. Yes, Dave. Says, Rishi Sunak and the 7 deadly bins. Should run with that. Should have done. Didn't think of that, did I? That would have been my title if I'd have thought of that one. That was very good. Yes. Nick Robinson actually doing his job. Where's he been for the last 8 years? Do you know what? He often does, to be fair. He's like there are quite a few journalists who sort of want to, but they're under certain constraints. Like, I always say, if you want to sort of see evidence of this, you could look at Andrew Marr. Now, excuse me. Andrew Marr is not my cup of tea. Even now that he's on LBC and he can sort of speak as he would ordinarily, I still think he's full of crap. But he's a markedly different type of journalist, shall we say, to when he was working on the BBC. Yeah? When he was working on the BBC, very obvious shill. Now he's sort of saying what he believes. What he believes is not what I believe, but it is at least saying what he believes. So Nick Robinson will be the same sort of thing. He's still at the BBC, you see. But given the constraints he's placed under, I actually do think he does ask some decent questions. And the important thing as well, see, there are quite a lot of journalists who do ask important questions. It's just that when they get a guff answer, they don't follow it up. Whereas Nick Robinson does a bit. So if we go through some of these things that they were saying. So I want to go through some of these. So on the issue of car manufacturers, right? So several car manufacturers were attacking these plans yesterday. So Robinson says to Sunak this morning, Ford says you've undermined consistency. Then Sunak says, oh, but they made these comments before my speech. Actually, since my speech, other manufacturers have been more positive. To which I thought to myself, well, where can I see these positive comments? Because I haven't seen any. So I went to the Financial Times. I don't think you can say fairer than that. The Financial Times, like the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and the Sun, places like that, they're pushing this agenda anyway. So you're not going to get anything sensible from them. The Financial Times will give you the facts, right? It's a capitalist newspaper. You can't say that it's going to be attacking the Tories for no good reason. And there is an article about the car industry's reaction, and the article was published today. So it's up to date. There's nothing in this article about car manufacturers going, oh, actually, after the speech, we're happy now. No, they're not happy now. They're actually very, very not happy now. Even the latest, even since the speech, they're not at all happy. Anyway, let's go through some more comments. We'll go on to the next bit. Craig saying, if he's cancelling crazy policies that haven't been actioned, has he done anything about Cruella's Soylent Green plans? No, they're still fine. I mean, Braverman was on. She was doing the interview round yesterday as well, making a proper arse of it as well. Murdoch's son is claiming a victory in its campaign against net zero. Yes, I noticed that. Let me remind myself. I'm not going to show you. Graham will go mad. But yeah, the front page of the Sun. Scraps meat and flight tax in eco pushback. There's no such thing as a meat and flight tax. Should be. I would argue there should be. You know, to be honest, I have no issue with a lot of these policies in theory. Taxes on eating meat, yeah. Again, if you use the money, like again, it's what you don't just tax for the sake of it. If you use the money to basically make it easier for people to eat healthier and more ecologically sound, if you see what I mean, that's fine. New taxes to discourage flying. Again, if you use the money to build in like lower carbon transport options, public transport options. If you link the tax with something that helps people to adopt more sort of low carbon approach, then I'm in favour of these things. Rachel Rees, £10 super chat, thank you very much. Phil, will Labour hold 2030 for the fuel diesel ban? Be so disappointed if they back down. They already have done. Now, some of the things that Rishi Sunak... Now, here's why I will say where you've got to, you know, be realistic. These deadlines, when they were set up, required a certain amount of investment. Now, there is... I should probably put this in the comments below for the people watching not live. If you look at the Office for Budgetary Responsibility's latest report, I'm afraid it's a bit heavy going. But if you look in the bits there where they're commenting on net zero, it does note that the government have basically been dragging their heels. So some of the deadlines, Labour have already said some of these deadlines they won't now be able to stick to if Sunak scraps them, right? Because he's not doing the work. The reason why these deadlines exist, these timeframes exist, is because it takes a certain amount of time to get the infrastructure in place. So with some of them, Labour won't be able to just recommit to them because the Conservatives are not doing that legwork, which means they have to start it almost from scratch when they come to power. But specifically, the ban on new petrol and diesel cars from 2030, Labour have said they will re-establish because the infrastructure for that's already in place, right? Yes, we need to expand the national grid. We need to expand our capacity. But remember, 2030 doesn't mean to say if you get yourself a car, it has to be an electric car. It just means, you know, you can't get a new petrol or diesel car. You know, you'll still be able to get second-hand cars. And cars these days last for bloody... There was a time where, you know, if a car was getting, particularly a Ford, but any car, if it was getting to like 10 years old, unless it was a diesels do last forever. But unless it was, you know, unless you were a good mechanic or had it checked a lot, once a car got to about 10 years, it'd be a bit ropey, it'd be a bit unreliable. These days, you can have cars go for 50, as long as you look after them, it can go for 15 years. Petrol cars can go for 15 years without any major problems. And there'll have been new cars being produced. So people will be able to get second-hand petrol and diesel cars for like years. But there we go, right. I've probably missed some more comments here. Starmer should assure car manufacturers the net zero policies will be reinstated ASAP. If Labour gets into power, perfect situation to be the PMA president. They've basically already said that. So they were quite clear about that. But they were also clear that some of the deadlines, if the Tories abandon them now, that work isn't being done. So that means you are going to have to delay them. So Labour will be straight on it when they come into power. But if the Conservatives are not doing the work they're supposed to be doing to meet these targets, Because Sunak at the moment is trying to have his cake and eat it. He's trying to say, oh yeah, because he's not saying we're abandoning net zero, because legally he can't. Democratically, he shouldn't even be doing this. I will point out, I'm sure you're all aware, but just to make it really clear, these are breaking manifesto promises. Now, consider this. A lot of people will say, oh, Rishi Sunak, no one voted for him to be Prime Minister. And I don't get into that because no one votes anyone to be Prime Minister, right? But the mandate is not from the Prime Minister, the person elected to be the leader of the government. The mandate derives from the winning manifesto. So the Conservatives won the election. They didn't win the popular vote. No one wins the popular vote. But they are deemed to have a mandate because they won the majority of seats. So their manifesto is the public mandate. So if you do the opposite of what the manifesto says you would do, you do not have any rights to do that. You know, the way to do it, if you think, because things can change, right? You know, you can have like COVID was an emergency that wasn't, or it should have been anticipated, but it wasn't anticipated when the Conservatives wrote their manifesto. So you can understand, okay, we understand some things. But if you're going to say that something's changed and you have to renege on part of your winning manifesto, the way to get the mandate then surely is with cross-party support. Because if other political parties agree that there has been a necessary change, then okay, that's fine. That is Parliament doing its stuff. But that's not what's happening here. Rishi Sunak does not even have, or this isn't even something for which he's got even all of his own MPs on board. There are several MPs breaking ranks here. Anyway, it would help massively if they would do something to get train companies to lower ticket prices to a level that doesn't require to sell a kidney to afford one. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I mean, that's a long-term project. So obviously Labour do have plans to renationalise it. It will take a while, I think, before the prices really came down. But even then, if they let the Tories back in, they'll just privatise it all again. You rarely see cars broken down the side of the road now. No, I'll tell you, that's true. Absolutely true. I noticed that. Where you do notice it, it's quite funny. Where I live, in South Humberside. So if you go to Grimsby, there's a road leading into Grimsby called the A180, right? Which is a concrete road. It's absolutely terrible. It was supposed to be laid as a temporary service, I gather, in the 1970s. It's still there now, right? It's concrete. So it sounds, so if you're used to driving on normal roads that have got tarmac on them, suddenly you go over concrete, it makes a terrible sound. So what you'll notice on the A180 is you'll see cars at the side of the road as if you might think they're broken because there's people looking underneath their cars and so on. And it's just because they're not used to driving down that road, so they think there's something wrong with their car. But in most, I mean, I did, first of all. I didn't stop at the side of the road. But I remember the first time I drove down it, I was a bit worried. And then I saw my mum and she said, oh, yeah, it's because of that road. Oh, you hate the A1? I don't go down the A1 that often. I do sometimes. Not enough to hate it. But the A180, yeah, if anyone has ever driven into Grimsby or out of Grimsby, I suppose you have to drive into it to be able to drive out of it. Yeah, it's a terrible road. It's concrete. There's little bits of tarmac on it these days, but it's mostly still concrete. So yeah, you get people driving down for the first time thinking their car's broken. But anyway, little aside. Let's have a look at some other things that Sunak's been saying. Yeah, so he was tackled about these made-up policies. Right, so I'm going to go to this last one now before I go to some more comments. So the last one technically is a policy. He calls it expensive insulation upgrades. Now, first of all, they're not expensive because insulation saves you money. But what he specifically means here, what he's got rid of, is the requirement for landlords to insulate their homes. So what this is, this is a way of, because so if you own your own home, right, it makes sense to insulate it because it only takes a few years, I think, to save the money on saved heating bills. So if you insulate your home, it costs you less to heat it, which has two benefits. First of all, it costs you less money over a few years. Secondly, it means that we're not using as much gas. So that is the net zero measure there. It means it's not just about saving money. It does save us money, but it also means that we don't burn as much gas for heating. But if you're a landlord, right, and you spend money on insulating the home that you are renting out, you don't get the benefit of the saved energy bills because the tenant pays the energy bills. So what Sunak's done here is, by scrapping this policy, not only does he mean that he's encouraging us to burn more gas, right, but he's helping landlords get out of a cost, but stopping tenants being able to save money. Right, that's what it's about. It's about having lower income people have higher energy bills to save landlords, who are generally wealthier, to save some money, and all prevent it or being a barrier to us meeting our net zero targets. Because it's going to mean more gas being burnt. Andy saying, I'm worried about second-hand electric cars because batteries seem to be noticeable lose life after a year based on mobile phone use. So there can be a concern with the electric cars in terms of lifespan. I don't think necessarily you base it on mobile phone battery use. But nonetheless, yes, there comes a point, like an engine will last for quite a long time. But once electric cells go, then they go. And there is an issue with electric cars in that you won't just be able to keep them. You won't just say, oh, well, let's just install some more cells. I don't know enough about it. I don't know whether in the long term it would be feasible to swap out cells. But yeah, there is an issue with the expected lifetime of an electric car from that point of view. But you know, it's again, we're not talking about something. Oh, you know, we're moving to electric cars because, oh, isn't it nice to have a quiet car on the road? It's nothing to do. Remember, this is about actually surviving into the next century. This is about literally humanity surviving into the next century. You have to electrify the country. We have to. We know we're not going to be able to tell people to not do energy intensive activities. We know we're going to be consuming lots of energy, so we have to make that energy as environmentally safe as possible. You know, it's an absolute imperative now. There is no argument about, you know, all these drawbacks with electric vehicles just have to, because there isn't an alternative. There is absolutely no alternative. We cannot carry on with combustion engines. We have got a landlord in Southampton whose houses are all still single glazed. Yeah, I mean, things, as I say, things like this. It's not about, like, you would justify making landlords insulate their homes just on the point of view of saving tenants money. That alone is justification. But as I say, this is an environmental imperative now. Who has 7 bins anyway? I mean, some people may do, I don't know. But what have we got? We've got 1 bin for just general waste. We've got a garden refuse bin, which hardly ever gets used because we don't have a garden. We've got a general recycling bin, which is for like plastic and cardboard. We have a glass bucket. It's not so much a bin as a bucket, like a box. And then we have another one for, like, you know, tin cans. So we've got 4. Well, I suppose 5, because there's 4 recycling ones and the general waste one. And it's not like a terrible imposition, is it? But the 7 things, I don't know where the 7 comes from. UK, the only country in Europe where the government's not offering incentives for EVs. I don't know whether that's strictly true. I mean, we've been giving quite a lot of our money to these companies, haven't we? We've been giving quite a lot of state aid. Is that not an incentive? But do you mean for people to buy them? Electric cars 50% heavier. Some multi-storey car parks need reevaluating. Not built for that extra weight. Possibly. I mean, the big thing we need to do is more charging points and more capacity on the grid. You know, if everyone were to suddenly have I mean, this obviously is going to happen over a very long number of years, but if everyone were to suddenly get an electric car straight away, we couldn't cope. Our national grid needs to have double the capacity it has right now, and they haven't been sorting this out. Look up Australia's separating rules. They don't get bins; they get plastic trays to put alongside their bins. We sort of have a half. Well, I suppose it depends because it's down to individual councils. But in my council, it's sort of half and half. Like I say, you've got 3 bins: the plastic and cardboard bin, the garden waste bin, and the general waste bin. But then you have a couple of like trays, boxes, buckets, whatever you want to call them. One for glass, one for like tins and stuff. Jamie Jones is saying modern batteries outlast the car. There's Teslas over 200,000 with little reduction in range. Well, that's good then. Keep meaning to find out what happens to the recycling in this country, whether it's really recycled or just dumped in another poor country. Quite a lot of it is recycled. What you'll often find, if you go, again, I can only speak from personal experience in the councils I've lived in. Generally speaking, if you go to the main recycling centre for a particular council, there's usually a board that tells you how much of the waste they've been able to recycle. Like if I go to Scunthorpe, which is the main centre for North Lincolnshire, if you go to the recycling centre there, the big one, there's like a board that tells you over the last sort of period of time, like the last, I think it might even be the month, but they tell you how much of the waste they've actually been able to recycle. It's quite a high number, really. But you should certainly be able to get that information from the council if you were interested. We seem to have gone on to recycling. Every parking space needs to have a charger. Yes, eventually, yes. I would just settle for way more of them. As I say, I don't know what it's like for some people who live in other parts of the country, but where I am, most car parks, you've got a few. At busy times, you're not going to get one of them. How hard can it be to build more charging points and more power station solutions? 7 years to do it. Well, the thing is, right, and again, this, if I go back to this, I am going to have to put this OBR report in the description below for you all. In this OBR report, it does note, and again, it's a lot of pages. I know you're realistically not going to read it all, but I've had a read of bits of it. And it does say that the main burden is expected to be the private sector for delivering this, but that because it's not happening, and the reason it's not happening is because the government aren't making them do it. But because it's not happening, there's going to be substantial costs to the public purse. But the thing to point out, all these Tory outlets going on about the cost of net zero, and there is a cost to net zero. It's reckoned to be about 6% of GDP, which you think, oh, that's a high cost. That's more than Brexit's costing us, yeah. But the cost of not delivering net zero by 2050, according to the same report, is 13% of GDP. So it costs our economy more. It's not like there's a cost to net zero and there isn't a cost to not net zero. There's a greater cost to not to net zero. Louise Darby, thank you very much. £5 super chat said, "Well, just like truly wheelchair accessible public transport so I can ditch my car." I mean, where I am, you wouldn't even get public transport of any kind. But yeah, I think actually, ironically, there is a bus service around here with wheelchair accessibility. But just in general, public transport where I am, because it's not exactly arse end of nowhere, but it's a bit out of the way, is very poor. There's like a bus. So like if you live where I am and you need to get into one of the main towns around us for work, depending on those work hours, it's probably not happening. So you can't get a bus at all. Like there's like a bus a day to take you there and to take you back and bring you back. And if it doesn't get you there in time for work and it doesn't set off back after your working shift is over, then you're not getting that job. Michael saying, I'm 75 years old, have never flown, so probably already carbon neutral. Although, well, you may be, but probably I don't think flying is what does it. Although I have a date with the crematorium before too long. I think we can deal with that one. But I mean, I've not flown for a very long time. I don't go anywhere, but even I don't think I'm carbon neutral. Any new build house constructed should be built to zero energy or energy plus at minimum, where all the energy required for the house is generated at source. Yes, something. I mean, it's so simple as well these days. It's so simple. Like one of the you've got already people who get like not just solar panels installed, but like battery storage installed. And the problem at the moment is like where can you put the battery storage in your home? Some people have got somewhere like a utility room that they're not really using for utility much. You know, some people have got the space to put it or under the stairs or something like that. But in a lot of people's homes, it's like, well, where then do you put it? Where do you put the battery storage? Whereas if you're building new homes to have these things in, then the homes are going to be designed to accommodate them. And that should absolutely be the case. It should 100% be the case, yes, that you've got in every new home build, you've got like small scale electricity generation. All built in, not blocking anyone's way or anything like that. Another super chat, thank you very much, from George. George, I hear, £2 super chat, I hear night rate off-peak tariffs end in March. I've not been keeping up on things like that, so I don't know. But, I mean, one thing, if we talk about, so this week, for example, inflation came down a bit, and it was expected to go up a bit, and it came down a bit. I think this might be for August or something. I think is it, or July? I can't remember. But the latest inflation figures. And the Conservatives go, oh, this is brilliant, it's come down. Everyone thought they were going up. It's quite a big deal. And it is a big deal, because if it's expected to go up and it came down, you know, okay, that's a significant drop. But it's still high. It's like something like, what is it, 6.7, 6.8% or something? And it's supposed to be within 2%. And then you think to yourself, Spain got their inflation down to 2%, didn't they? How did they do that? Oh, they did that by stopping energy companies charging ridiculous rates. Because there's no reason for energy companies in this country to be charging what they're charging. The wholesale price of gas has been low for ages now, all this year, basically. There's absolutely no reason for it. No reason at all. So the energy price should have come back down to where it was, pretty much. And it hasn't. And the government could have done. That would create a huge drop in inflation. And the government could have chosen to do that. In fact, even when gas prices were high, you know, Labour and the Lib Dems said to the Conservatives, put a windfall tax on oil companies, use the money to compensate the energy companies for the higher wholesale cost of the gas they're selling you, you know, and then you keep your prices pretty much, they might have had to go up a couple of percent, but you basically keep them the same. And then inflation would have remained low. The Tories could right now be boasting about the fact that our inflation is lower than lots of other advanced economies, because that would be true. And that one policy, and there's other things they could have done as well, but that one policy of just keeping energy prices down, which wouldn't have cost the taxpayer a penny, and it wouldn't have cost energy or oil companies profits either. They'd have still been making the same profits that they... This would just be the tax on windfall profits. So they would still be making their expected profits because there was no reason for them to go up. It was just a shift in supply chains. That was all. But there we go. Right, last few comments because we've come to the end again. Building more houses will necessitate more energy, thus national electrification anyway, won't it? Only if it's all part of a LinkedIn strategy. That's what we need, a LinkedIn strategy. The fact is the government isn't showing leadership on this. They could try to rally the public and corporations, engage them in coming up with solutions to the climate crisis, but they're too greedy. The thing is, the public and corporations are already sort of on board with this. They're already on board with it. I mean, look, Rishi Sunak announces a delay of 5 years on banning the sale of diesel and petrol cars. And the car industry is going mental at it. They're going mad. They're saying, no, we don't like this. That idiot from Guido Fawkes was going, oh, this just sounds to me like they don't like the competition. It's like, you absolute chump. What competition? It's the same car companies. The same companies who are producing these EVs are the same ones who would be producing the petrol and diesel cars. There is no, they're compete. He's moaning that they're whining about competing with themselves. Absolute idiots. It's not like you've got some car companies that make petrol and diesel and some other ones who make EVs. It's the same bloody ones. So if the car industry, like if it were a good thing for them that they can carry on selling their petrol and diesel cars beyond 2030, then they wouldn't be attacking this. The reason they're attacking it is because it's thrown their investment plans out. If they'd have said from the start by 2035, then it would be fine. But they've said, you know, they have invested all, you know, we've been given quite a lot of money to it, but they have been investing money, a lot of hundreds of millions of pounds. You know, you're talking about some companies chucking in £500 million or so to make sure they can meet this deadline. And then they're being told, oh, no, you don't have to meet that deadline at all. Except they're not being told that because Labour are saying, no, we're going to re-establish this deadline. So actually, car manufacturers are just going to proceed. They're just going to completely ignore the government. So Rishi Sunak has just basically made himself look impotent because car manufacturers are going to proceed anyway, in line with their investments and in line with the party that is going to be in government next year. But there we go. And yet, even now, the new policy, just to reiterate, the new policy isn't just, oh, you can carry on making your petrol and diesel cars until 2035 now. There's still a quota. So the new government policy is that 80% of new cars this is, have to be EVs in 2030 and 100% by 2035. So it's not like some people may be taking this to mean, oh, they can just keep churning out the petrol and diesel cars even in 2030. It's like, no, the government are still saying, no, 80% of them still have to be EVs. It's just the remaining 20% have to be EVs over the following 5 years there. So it's not even as big a change as some people might think it is if they're reading The Sun. You know, which again is why it's very easy for Labour to say, no, we're just going to re-establish the original deadline. Rachel, final comment here. Rachel Rees saying, the idea of 2030 was get investment in the UK ahead of EU. It was working. They could have argued that was a Brexit benefit. I mean, I don't think it could have. No, I don't think that because the UK could still have said that anyway. They could still have pushed that idea in the EU. But yeah, they could have claimed it if they wanted to. They could have claimed it. But anyway, yes, we've very much run out of time. I'll just throw a couple of little messages at the end, just to a reminder. Well, don't forget to click the like button and to subscribe to the channel, of course. But also, it's the Rejoin March in London this Saturday, so that's where we will be then. And a couple of weeks after that, be the Labour Party conference, so I'd better make sure there's a link below if anyone happens to be in Liverpool on Monday the 9th of October, because in the camp, not inside the conference, we're doing that on Tuesday, outside the conference though, where anyone can go if you've got a ticket. The Femi, Tan, myself and Graham doing a thing on social media, if anyone wants to go to that. So I'll make sure there's a link in the description below for that as well. But other than that, have a very good day, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.